All right. Here we are. Welcome back to the Blockument. We do crypto education through everyday education.
Conversations.
And innovation.
And innovations. We do all that. Right.
Since we freestyling up in.
Since we're doing that. My name's Nate Talbot. I'm the executive director of the Detroit Blockchain Center. And to my right, we have
Ashlee Rose. I am your everyday girl. I am a mother and a reseller. I am just on this journey taking you all with me so we can learn what is crypto and Bitcoin and what is going on with all this stuff.
Right. Today's show is pre-recorded and not live, so you cannot call in. So you can call in, but we won't answer today. But definitely reach out to us at theblockument.com. You can find some resources for the show, where we're at, and where you can go to ask questions. We'll tie all that stuff in towards the end. Today we're talking about what is money. We'll sort of do a reflection of where it's been, where we are, and possibilities of where we're headed. And we have a special guest in the house today. My main man's, my brother-in from another mother-in, Damon Gunn, D Gunn. What's up, brother?
Hey, what's going on, Nate? Ashlee, how's everybody doing?
Doing good. I asked Gunn to come on today because we're talking about what is money, and I'm not going to speak for you, so I'll let you sort of pop it in, but you're familiar with like crypto space and blockchains. You know what they are, the basics. But Gunn is like one of the few humans on Earth, in my opinion, that is a philosopher type that I can have wide-ranging discussions with. He's definitely a smarter human than I am. He has insight. He challenges me when I get on some BS. And when we start talking about things like what is money, especially when we get to why we need it, where we're at, I know he has awesome insights on it and perspectives and whatnot. How you feel about that summary I gave you?
Well, I'm sure you say that to all the guests that come on, but no, I appreciate it. But I'm just newbie here. I don't know much about the crypto world other than I was mostly buy, flip, get in, get out, quick thing. I didn't look at it as wealth building for its wealth building potential. Right. So I'm learning, just like hopefully everybody who's watching this is learning, because you're the expert, and actually, so you guys are the experts. I'm here for moral support and to learn and shit. Hopefully I can ask some smart questions to live up to this big brain label you just gave me. So.
I think you represent, just like, although Ashlee's taking a more active journey out of it, but I think you definitely represent probably 99.5% of people who have ever interacted in some shape, form, or fashion with crypto at all. Yeah. That's their thing. They bought some on Robinhood. They tried to flip it, make a little bit of money, which is fine, but I think there's context, as I'll end today's show, as I end all the shows, I have the come for the riches, stay for the revolution. That's sort of why. Money drives me. That's why I came. I first started getting Bitcoin because somebody asked me about it, Gun, people, I'm sometimes the person people come to when they want to know how to do something, because I can Google better than them. It's really the end story of all that.
Hey, don't underestimate that talent.
Yeah, right. And that's how I got into it, right? It's like somebody asked me they needed some Bitcoin for something, and they didn't know how to get it. I figured out how to get it. This is like in 2013 or something, so it was still pretty challenging if you didn't sort of know. I charged them money, good old fiat money, to do it, and I kept a little, change left over. I thought, like, a couple years went by, and it was like, oh yeah, I think I had like $70 or something. Let me see what this thing is. Somebody stole it from me or something, and it was like $700. I was like, what the just happened? Like, I had no idea, and that's sort of what led me down the rabbit hole. So like everybody else, I came for the money part too. But that's sort of the focus for today is what is money, and not just a retrospect. You can read books on all of that stuff as far as diving deep into 5,000 years of debt and the ascent of money. A couple books you can dig deep into it. But I think today we're going to go more of a hour-long journey where money was, why we have it in the first place, where we're at, why it matters, and then sort of where the future is. And that's why I think a lot of your perspectives will come in, and some questions you might have that I might be able to answer and I might not be able to answer. And if I can't answer them, we'll link to the resources and we'll keep doing more studies and keep coming back and asking the questions. Yeah. So, as tradition, we're going to start off with sort of what is money. Can you, Ashlee, give me your interpretation? What do you think? I'm going to make it a little harder for you on what is money. Not what is money, but more why is money? Why do we even have, money, and to buy things isn't an acceptable answer?
Okay. Why do we have money? We have money to exchange value and to keep order in doing so. I think because so I have to be clear here. I've gotten a little bit of pre-tutoring on this, not today, but in previous chats with Nate and other people. But basically, yeah, I think that it's to store a value, and
that's it.
Yeah, that's all I got.
What about you, Gunn? What's the for you? What is money, and sort of maybe what role do you feel it plays in society?
It's like the all essential role, because money just it explains what the value of a product is, or a commodity, and so you need to measure that against something, and that's what money is. That's why money exists, and it only exists. Money exists. It has a value. Whatever you deem is valuable is what money is. Yeah. So you go to different cultures. You go to places in West Africa. They trade cowrie shells for food or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's a barter system. It's something that I think is probably as old as civilization.
Yeah. Yep. I would agree with all your. Thing with money is, you definitely hit on it. You were hitting around it.
Yeah, I was going to say the barter thing, and then I totally spaced out.
Well, there's a lot of disagreement on the barter piece of it all. It is a way of trading, right, without using barter.
Wait, can I say what I was going to say? 'Cause I remembered. Okay. I was going to say that most people do always go to the barter piece, but the reason that we need money is because what you always say, or have said in the past, is that, maybe you're farming oranges and I make cheese or something, and if you want what I have but I don't want what you have, how do we make that transaction happen without somebody going away feeling like
barter is a really sloppy way to organize transactions, to organize value. And that's why when you were the value piece, I think the first thing people, before you get into any technical definitions, right? Money is it's just a way to store value, and value is what whoever the participants deem valuable. And money systems that we have now is totally made up. That's the first thing everybody's got to know. You talk about, we just made it up to function in society. There's no such thing. You can't date pre-human and have concepts of money. We just totally made it up to organize. And since we just made it up, it gets to be whatever we want it to be, because it's been made up. A lot of people go back to the barter system piece, and while barter is a way to do trading, it's never, that I know of, there is no evidence of any society at scale ever using barter as a dominant means. So you might find bartering within a society. I know there's a small. There's like this village. I forgot the name of it. I was just watching something on it in Africa, who they're starting to go back to do. They have like this barter market because their local currency is such crap, and so they'll go in and they'll sort of like, sort of what you said. Look, I got cheeses and oranges, but it's very inefficient because if I got cheese and you got oranges, and I want oranges, but you don't want cheese.
Yeah.
But you want, pencils, and he's got pencils. So I was like, hey, I need pencils. Like, well, I don't want cheese either. It's just such an inefficient system at scale. You can make it work in person every now and then. Most of that barter stuff came from Adam Smith. He was I think he was Scottish. This is all like right around the time the U.S. Revolution is happening. This is like your late 1700s, right? The 18th century. He wrote his second book, which is The Wealth of Nations, and he basically philosophized about like sort of what is money and what's the value and economy. You hear about
the founding fathers figured that out.
They used Adam
Pretty
Smith.
quick, yeah. It was.
They referred to, like, if you look at Hamilton, who's like started the Treasury Department and all that, like he was going off the writings of Adam Smith. This was like the big bomb thing, like finance, everything changed right around the mid 18th century as Adam Smith ideas started to push forward. When you hear about like the invisible hand of the markets, that's an Adam Smith piece. There's all these things you think of now with common capitalism, all date back pretty much to Adam Smith. He didn't invent a lot of the ideas. I mean, some things have been around for a while, but he sort of organized that structure and made it think of.
But fiat currency was.
Well, fiat currency is even younger than that. Fiat currency only goes 50 years or so back.
Well, not really, because that's what colonial script was.
Well, no, everything was based. Well,
that's literally what colonial script was. They said, what was his name, King George?
Yep.
He was making them pay their taxes and tributes, whatever, in silver and gold. And they said, why should we do that? Like, y'all killing us over here when we can just make our own fucking paper money.
Yeah.
Because that's what we value,
right?
Trade amongst ourselves, and that's what we use, and that's literally what started the American Revolution.
But the script was, so fiat by definition it's issued by governments, and so you have even had banks who have issued money. Like even in the early U.S., you had different banks that would issue different forms of currency and stuff. For fiat, it's a government issued money, and governments got into that. How even with King George, like gold. So you go far enough back when you talk about like gold, which is the oldest form of common value money across civilizations you can sort of find. Governments have always sort of controlled money flows. It's sort of what governments do, right? They control the flow of money. What they would do is they would find this third-party asset, gold, silver, script, whatever. People are using seashells. It could be seashells, and they would either make it official. They would either make it an official currency, and maybe like with gold, they'll coin it and throw their stamp on it, so it's real gold. It's not fake gold because we have this stamp, and that's hard to forfeit back then. They would do something to control it, but you think of like Middle Age wars and stuff where most people will probably be familiar with the concept from like a Game of Thrones thing, right? Where you had like the central bank, right? Yeah. And the high bank where kings have to go to get money. Well, those sort of really existed because they controlled the gold flow, and then empires had to go to it. And then like in the 19th century, you had like government bonds would start coming around. And that's how governments would raise money. They would basically say like, let us borrow money and we'll guarantee you, usually because we're about to go to war. And if you think we're going to win the war, why wouldn't you trust us? Because we're about to grab all this new land and stuff, and we're going to pay you back your money with a little guaranteed interest for letting us borrow it. And then during World War II, when they wanted to print a lot more money, and this was back when money was backed by gold, at least the U.S. dollar was backed by gold, fractionally, right? So it wasn't like an ounce of gold for $1. They would just fractionally reserve this stuff. But
Can you
they
explain
wanted to
what
print.
that is fractional?
Yeah, let's go back.
Reserve banking.
Let's go even further back. Let's go back to like early civilization where we're traders, right? And barter isn't going to work. We already talked about that, right? The barter system isn't really going to work efficiently for large scale. So you're any kind of society, and you want to figure out a way to be efficient, right? One thing I've deemed, being a Bitcoiner myself, Bitcoin runs off of the concept of proof of work, right? Where you have to expend energy from someplace. Bitcoin doesn't care where you get the energy from, but you have to expend energy in order to produce new Bitcoin, right?
What's an example of that?
For Bitcoin or
Like,
outside
what's
of
an
that?
example of
A real world?
proven energy, whatever. What was the term you just used?
Proof of work.
Proof of work.
Yep.
What's an example of proof of work?
Well, I think
Like for
early.
somebody who don't know anything.
Yeah, well, the real example to me is the concept of money. It's like, what is money, right? And you can say, all right, well, money is a way to transfer value, but like, all right, so value of what? And really, when you come down to it, once you go down those, like the whys question far enough, it's value of work or time spent. If I'm trying to be a lumberer, I need people to cut down trees, right? You're going to be a lumberer for me. You're going to be a lumberjack. You're going to come and help cut down the trees. I have to compensate you for your time. Now, what do you need? You need food. You need housing. You need clothing, right? I don't have those things. So I have to come up with something else, right? And this is sort of where money comes in. And this, again, it doesn't really matter what that thing is. There are some key traits we'll talk about in a second, but it could be shells or it could be gold coins or whatever. I'm going to give you this, let's say gold coin, in exchange for you doing work, and that's an IOU. That's a proof of you did work. You did something of value that expended energy or time or something
But I'm
that
saying, explain
would be
it
of
to
value.
me like I'm a 2-year-old. Like for somebody
that's
just
how it would.
listening who doesn't know anything about Bitcoin, they say, well, I go to work.
I'm not talking about Bitcoin. I'm not talking about Bitcoin. I'm talking about literally if you're a lumberjack, whatever it is,
No, but
we
you
do.
started off by saying Bitcoin is based on proof of work.
I think it would be easier to start here and go to Bitcoin versus starting at Bitcoin going backwards, right? It started with the lumberjack. The proof of work concept started with you're going to put in work. I need to give proof that you did that work. I need a proof that you expended that energy, and that's what money sort of becomes. I give you this dollar, whether it's a seashell or whatever, and now you can go into society and you can go buy your own food or pay your own rent or pay whatever. And if you're going to buy something for Ashley, she's like, well, instead of doing barter, she's like, well, I need proof of value. Well, here's my dollar. This proves I've done value. And now a society, whatever that medium of exchange they're using is, seashells to coins to bitcoins to dollars, we all agree that represents work was done, right? And that's sort of where a concept, there's like 3 key traits to what is good money, right? So good money, in the order of importance to me, is going to be, you have to have something that's a store of value, because at the end of the day, you exerted work. And you need to get compensated for it, and you want to spend that. You have this purchasing power with this $1 I gave you, right? You have $1 worth of purchasing power. It's in your best interest to have that dollar purchasing value last as long as possible. You want it to last decades, if not centuries, right? And so it has to have this store of value aspect. We could use we could use apples, right? We could use a lot of different little things, but they're perishable. Yeah. And so I give you apples. Maybe apples are a rare resource, right? But they don't last very long. And your proof of work, you literally can watch it wither away within weeks. Yeah. And so that's not a good store of value, which is why things like gold became sort of that gold standard. It doesn't, the value holds, right? And it's hard to fake. It's whatever.
It increases, yeah.
Right? So you have that strong store of value. So that's the most important thing for a society, for money. Then you have to have a means of exchange, right? We have to agree this is stored value. We all agree this is that value symbol. And so we can be a medium of exchange now. You can exchange labor for it. We can exchange goods for it. We can exchange whatever. So it's got to be a strong store of value. It's got to be a medium of exchange. And after a while, once a society comes to an agreement on a specific item that's going to be that currency, then it's going to be a unit of account, right? That's your third aspect of money. And unit of account is basically, it's like, how much do you think this bottle of water cost? Right? Give me your example. What do you think this bottle of water costs?
$1.
Right. So we've just made the dollar the unit of account. Maybe I only accept Bitcoin, but you're like, well, how much Bitcoin do you need? Well, I need $1 worth of Bitcoin. Where the dollar becomes that unit of account. And until you have a commonly used currency across, or it makes more sense to talk about a Bitcoin, pricing in a Bitcoin and the price is $1, right? You don't wake up one morning and say, how much is $1 worth? Because it's worth $1. You know that purchasing power. And you say a Bitcoin is worth X amount of dollars, and not the other way around. And when that swaps, you know Bitcoins become the unit of account. How much is $1 worth? Well, shit, it's worth 20 Satoshis. All I know is Satoshis. So that's where you start, and that's your proof of work, right? You have to put in work to have that. I brought up Bitcoin with proof of work because that was the same concept they used. So to create a Bitcoin, it's digital, right? So there's not, you could just write some code and make it self-generate. We don't need to have some external resource for a digital thing. But now you're printing money out of thin air, and what's the real value of that? It misses the store of value aspect. We can use it as exchange, but where's the value lie? I can just print the shit out of thin air, right? So how Bitcoin operates and how proof of work, any proof of work token or coin works, is they're like, all right, well, you can't forge energy, right? Energy can't be created, it can't be destroyed, and you have to exert resources and energy to gather it and utilize it, right? Whether that's solar power, hydropower, coming from coal, wherever you're getting it from. And so how a proof of work in a blockchain system works is you exert energy, you have to solve everybody knows the proof of work in Bitcoin is this, you're solving a puzzle, right? We're just guessing a number. When people say like it's a complex puzzle in Bitcoin for proof of work, it's not a complex puzzle. It uses some cryptography. You're literally guessing a number. And what the network tells you is it uses, cryptography. We won't get deep into the math, but it's basically like the Bitcoin network is like, I'm thinking of a number that starts with 9 zeros.
Oh, no.
I'm thinking of this 64-digit string, and the first 6 digits start with 0. Guess it. And the only way you can guess it is being like, is it 0? They'll be like, nope, that doesn't start with 9 zeros. Is it 1? Nope, that doesn't start with 9 zeros.
Oh, my God.
And so your computer is literally just guessing a number until it finds a number that makes this cryptographic string start with like 9 zeros.
I did not know that.
Once it gets it, that's the proof of work. And the only way to make your computer do that is to plug it into a wall and let your computer run.
Oh, my gosh.
But there's so many numbers, depending on how many people are participating, right? There's so many computers trying to guess the number. You can't just use a off-the-shelf $200 computer.
Yeah.
Right? Now, you got to have a computer that has some serious processing power. And if you've ever used a computer to watch like Netflix or something, you notice after a while, after watching YouTube or Netflix, the computer fan kicks on, right?
Yeah.
You get that little humming sound because it's the fan cooling off the processor because the processor is trying to play this movie.
Yeah.
Well, imagine one computer trying to play like 100,000 high-definition 4K movies at once, right?
Yeah.
That's an energy drain. You're pulling energy. Yeah. That's the proof of work. And so that's what a miner does. And so when they print a new Bitcoin, now all of a sudden you've proven, I've solved this puzzle. The only way I can solve this puzzle is to make a computer guess this ungodly high number that you can't even really fathom, right? We're not talking like in the billions. We're talking about in the hundreds of billions, right? Type of numbers. The only way I could have guessed it is if I expended the energy.
Yeah.
I proved my work. Just like you come to work for me as a lumberjack and you cut down a tree. When you bring me the logs, you've proved to me you expended the energy of cutting down the tree.
Yep.
I'll give you money and that's proof of work.
Yep.
So that's why I say money is just proof of work. Right? And it doesn't really matter what we use to represent that proof as long as it's not going to wither away.
Yeah.
And that's why we've gone from seashells and everything else. But the other interesting thing that's sort of important when you're talking about money is once you understand that concept, well then, what is money really, right? It's debt.
Oh yeah, this.
I owe you, right? That receipt, whatever we use as a currency, is a proof of debt. Yeah. I owe you, and theoretically, whoever you give that to should be able to come to me and get something of value for that debt. And so when you hear people talk about money as debt, well, that's where that comes from, because it's all based off of this system of owing and why we came up with it in the first place. A small society, again, they didn't use barter. Doesn't make sense. Going back to your orange and cheese example, right? I'm not going to trade. There's 5 of us in this little community, right? I'm not going to spend my time worrying about how much fucking cheese you owe me or whatever. It's like, hey, I need food and you got food. You're like, here's food, great. Yeah. And you're like, hey, I need wood. Well, Gunn's like, well, I got wood, here's wood. Gunn's like, I need clothes. I'm like, here's clothes, because we already know. Yeah. We owe each other. Again, it's a system of debt. We know we want to specialize. We're not all going to hunter and gather for ourselves for everything. We're going to live in a little village, a little farming community. And you're good at farming. I'm good at building the huts. You're good at raising the animals, and we're going to work cooperatively. But when that village gets bigger and bigger, because now you start a society, you know, that whole
that's not
who's the one that has the wood. So you have to start keeping a record, and this is where you get like the rye stone. Yeah. If you do a history of money, you'll hear about this big rye stone that was hard to forge, and the community would come down here and they would like just sort of jot down on this stone. If you wanted to see who owed who what, you would just go to the stone and look.
This reminds me a little bit of what you were saying on one of our previous podcasts about how Elon Musk, he was saying how his definition of money is that it's, what did he say? It was it was information.
Yeah, he's like, it's a way of storing information. I thought that was really interesting. It sort of aligns still with it. It's like, going back to like the worker example, you're working for money, so you need money to work. But for me now, as a business, I need a way to best allocate resources. And money is how you do that. And that's why you hear these sort of cliche trends, right? Like make your money work for you, or money makes money. You know what I mean? Money will always find its way to the smartest, whoever knows how to spend it best, because it's a way of allocating resources. It's like an information system. So the way he sort of labels it, it's like just a database. And it's a database of debt. Right? And then here's how I'm going to allocate this debt over here to these kind of resources. And now, especially if you want to push forward a business or a society or whatever, it's a way of allocating that. So it's like this big database structure, which fits nicely into anybody who's doing like blockchain-based stuff, because what's a blockchain, right? It's just a database. It's literally it's a ledger of entries of inputs and outputs. Well, that's
kind of why I brought it up, because it's interesting, the correlation there of the blockchain being the ledger of transactions, and then Elon giving the definition of it being information, which is like what you just said, all the same.
Yep. And then you get to, so that's like sort of your history of where you go. And the medium of exchange, again, it can go from seashells to beads to, gold coins. It can be whatever made currencies. But as you build that gets more and more centralized. You need those centralized entities, right? Like a bank and things like that. Because, like, if we're going to the gold piece and you're traveling around, who wants to carry around all that gold? Yeah. Right? So I'll go store, and Gunn, you might be like, hey, well, I just built a little fortress. And if you don't want to carry around your gold or worry about somebody stealing it when you're out, put it here. I'll give you that receipt. Yeah. Right? And that's sort of the history of paper money, where that first came from, right? Just, again, a record of receipts. Banks, but that was a really crappy business model for the banks, because they weren't making much. They could charge you a little to hold the money, but that's boring. So like finance gets born, right? And you get that fractional reserve.
And that's when they got into fraud.
Yeah, well, yes. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, because fractional reserve banking is fraud. When you loaning people money out at interest, and that person isn't benefiting off that, that's fraud.
Well, they did benefit at first. And here's the thing. it's like if you give me gold and I give you a receipt and I'm going to tell you, well, just pay me however much you put in, give me 1%. I'm going to keep 1% of whatever you give me and I'll hold the rest for you. Right? And that's just a transaction. But that's not enough for me. So I'm like, I'd really like to make more money. And Ashlee keeps coming to my door like, hey, I know you hold all the money for these people. Let me borrow some. And I'll give it back. And I started thinking about it like, you know what, though? What if instead of charging Gunn 1%, right, I tell him I'll hold his money for free on the condition that for every dollar of value he gives me, right, I'm going to loan out 30% of that, right? So I'll always have 70% of your money sitting in a safe someplace. But let me borrow 30% or let me take 30% and do with as I wish with it, right? And I'm going to make money off of that. I know I'm going to make 5% off of that. And so in exchange, instead of you giving me 1% to hold your money, what if I give you 1% for keeping your money here? And I'm upfront with you. I'm telling you what I'm going to do with it, right? So that's not really fraud right there. That's just a business transaction. You have to, there's risk. You have to decide whether you want to take that risk or not.
But does the bank really tell you that?
Yeah, they do, sort of.
In the fine print.
Well, we're gonna. Well, this is where we get to the fraud. This is why I was like, it's fraud. I wasn't like, no, it's not fraud.
Yeah.
It's like sorta, but not up front because now we have a very straightforward relationship. But greed is definitely a mother, right? And so it's like, all right, well, it's not just Gunn depositing the money, right? So I have thousands of people depositing money to me, and I'm telling everybody 30%, and it's like somebody comes to my door and they ask me for more than what I have. And so in my head, I might think, yeah, but will anybody notice if I give 35% instead of 30? And how do you audit that?
Yeah.
I'm not giving you permission to come in and literally count. I'm not keeping your gold separate and letting you count how many pegs are there to make sure it's still 70% of what you gave me. So you can't really audit besides taking my word for it. And I'm good at that. That's a workable feature as long as everybody doesn't come back and ask for their money at the same time.
Yep.
Right? Because then you get the run and I can't pay back the run on that. I can't even pay you back your 70% because I've over leveraged. Yep. And that's where the fraud piece comes in. This is where we get the every kind of bank run you had, from the Great Depression to the 2008 thing to if you're in the crypto space, and even if you're not in the crypto space because it's expecting so much currently when we're recording this episode, right? The whole FTX debacle, and that's what they did. People put money in, and then FTX told them, we're going to hold it and let you trade, and we'll keep these reserves. But what they really did is they gave it to their trading wing and used it to trade against the customers and all this other craziness, and gave it to politicians and invested in these bits. They did all this stuff with your money that you thought were there. And so when you come back, they do that rob Peter, pay Paul, right? Yeah. It's a big old Ponzi thing. But when everybody comes back, which is what happened, everybody came back and they're like, let's freeze these withdrawals and try to figure something else out.
And so what I'm to understand is like the whole Bitcoin, not Bitcoin necessarily, but crypto, the whole thing behind it is the blockchain technology.
That's a piece of it. The whole thing behind it is
okay. How big of a piece is it?
I think the best analogy I would have is how important is the transmission to the automobile, right? It's really, really important. Yeah. But it's not the automobile. And you could maybe one day find a way to replace the transmission with something else, right?
A new or rebuilt. Another transmission.
Maybe another transmission, or maybe a whole different system of making the wheels turn based off of a infused gas or energy system or whatever, right? And it's the same thing with the blockchain. Right now, I don't know of another way. There's other ways to do distributed ledgers, so you don't need a blockchain per se. But none of them work that I've ever seen as good as a blockchain. And a blockchain doesn't work very good unless you're trying to do this in a way that doesn't have a central authority, right? A regular database works way better than a blockchain, but you have to have a central authority. The thing with Bitcoin and any cryptos that have modeled after that is, how do we do this without the central authority? And that was the genius of Bitcoin. Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever
that's
they
what
are.
I was really trying to
brought together.
Like, how do you avoid this that middleman, that bank who's gonna loan your shit out and leave you ass out when you want it back.
Yeah, proof of work. You have to do it distributed. So everybody's familiar with like the file sharing, whatever system you use to like download movies off the internet in the late 2000s. Not that any of us would have done something like that, but
I heard about it from a friend.
Yeah. But that's how that worked, right? You weren't downloading your movies from a central computer someplace. Like, you downloaded whatever was hot at the time. You downloaded The Matrix, and Ashlee had The Matrix on her computer, and y'all just had it on your computer.
What was it called?
I want it.
Or something like that?
Yeah, it's like a BitTorrent, LimeWire. All of these work sort of the same. What would happen is these central services would have pointers. They'd be like, oh, you want The Matrix? It's on these computers. And then I would just download a little bit from your computer, a little bit from your computer, and it was just distributed. It was distributed file, which is why they were so hard, like the Pirate Bays and all that were so hard to shut down, because the server was this small file system that just had pointers in it. Yeah. The files sat in your computer, so I didn't need a data center. And once the FBI or the feds or whoever, Interpol, got on to whoever's running that system, they literally just took their little hard drive and fled the country and plugged it in a different country. And now, it was a big cat and mouse game. It was really hard. But still, there was a central identity you could come after. What Bitcoin's genius is, it took these several technologies. Blockchain wasn't even a term then when Bitcoin first. Like, when you look at the white paper, it doesn't say blockchain anywhere. It's called a time ledger, because that's really all it is. It's like, how do we organize these transactions in a way to know first come? That's how they solve like the double spend. How do I know it's digital, right? How do I know you're not giving the same Bitcoin away twice? Well, the blockchain is just Damon Gunn sent, this random string of numbers, which is you, has this amount of coin. He sent this exact same amount of coin. He has 1 Bitcoin. He now sends this 1 Bitcoin to both Ashlee and both Nate, right? And then when the miner does their proof of work piece, guess that number. What the miner is doing is like they're picking either either the Bitcoin you sent me or the Bitcoin you sent Ashlee. Whichever one they pick, they throw it in there, right? And that gets a timestamp. And even if I make it in underneath you, which I wouldn't because the miner just wouldn't include mine, even if I made it in, the network is only going to respect the very first Bitcoin. It's going to ignore the rest of them. So it doesn't matter that you sent it to me. The one that you sent Ashlee made it into the blockchain first. It's now her Bitcoin, and you don't have the Bitcoin anymore to send to me. And I'm just ass out. Right? And that's why in any blockchain network, you're supposed to wait until you get a confirmation that the money sent to you actually made it in the chain. Because if it hasn't made it in the chain yet, if you get 0 confirmations, it's not really yours. It's still open to debate. And then who owns that, right? Whether Gunn kept it or whether he gave it to somebody else. And that's really what Bitcoin did, and that's what these other systems are all modeled after, is how do you remove these central authorities to do things. Now, the problem is most people come in, just like you said you came in for, and, you came for the money piece. You don't know about the purpose behind it. Maybe you came for an NFT. You don't care about this whole flow.
In the beginning, I was like, how do you spend it? You know what I'm saying? Like, I wasn't aware of any place like you could go in and say, I have I have Coinbase. Like, look, here's my Bitcoin on Coinbase. Give me that shirt. You know what I'm saying? So that concept, and I still think it's foreign to a lot of people. Yeah. Like I just saw a commercial that said you can buy gold and then they give you a debit card for the gold. So you buy gold, you can actually spend the gold. How do people spend Bitcoin?
You spend it just like you spend $1, right? You go someplace, I got something you want, you send me some Bitcoin, I'll give you the product that you want. What you're doing, and this is a big problem in the space because people don't get the fundamental why. The purpose of Bitcoin is to get the middlemen out of the equation, the value extractors. I don't need them. I used to need them. In-person transactions, you had physical dollars. So you and me get together, and I want to give you money for something. I want something you have. I can give you physical dollars. You give me product that's private. It's there. It's all at the business. We've done a transaction.
It's peer-to-peer.
It's really easy to do when you're geographically located next to somebody. But you want to send some money to somebody on the other side of the country or on an entirely different, the other side of the world. How do you do that? You can't. You have to use these central trusted entities. You either have to put it in an envelope, give that envelope to the post office, we'll give it to the international post office, who will then maybe deliver, and you're trusting that these post offices in between aren't stealing the money out the envelope. Or you put the money in the bank, and then the bank has an agreement with another bank, and that bank has an agreement with another bank until it finally gets to your bank, and you're paying fees all along the way. And then you spent $100 and you used Western Union, and they took 10% of that, for fees, because they have to pay everybody along the whole channel. You always had to use middlemen for these kind of things. They had a use. It was messed up. There was a lot of fraud involved, but what other option? So this distributed network, using a blockchain-based currency, this allowed me to send money to you directly. I didn't have to trust anybody. You and me could transact, and I don't even have to trust you, and you don't have to trust me, because like with a Bitcoin network, I have my copy of the Bitcoin blockchain. I'm running my own node, right? And this is the key piece if you really want to use it. I run my own node, which means I got my own copy of the blockchain in my computer, right? And I don't care what anybody else's copy says. All I care about is my copy. My copy says that Gunn has 1 Bitcoin. And when you call or however you message me and say, I just sent you a Bitcoin, I'm not asking Ashlee. I'm not asking anybody. I'm just looking at my copy and I'm waiting. And then I'll see that you'll send me maybe a transaction ID, and I'll see your transaction ID in what's called the mempool, this little thing that's not the blockchain. It's just this pool of transactions waiting to go in, right? They haven't been ordered in a block yet, and the block hasn't been mined yet. So I see it over there, but I don't got it. I just see it over there. I'm waiting for it to make it into a block, and that block has a confirmation. And I can look and say, oh, look, 1 confirmation. Gunn sent me the Bitcoin. I'm not trusting that you said it. I'm just looking. And then it's up to me to decide, is 1 confirmation all I want? Because maybe for some reason that 1 Bitcoin, that's just like today's value is like $16,000, maybe Gunn found a way to co-opt the network for 1 block. And that might cost you because you have to expend energy, right? This is why proof of work is important. You have to expend real energy to fake off a transaction, and then you have to do it faster than 51% of the entire network. And that way you can cheat me. So when 1 confirmation I have it, you control the network. So maybe you take it back, the next block happens, all of a sudden it's gone. So maybe I decide to wait for 2 confirmations, because I got to say, now it cost him like 20 grand to cheat me out of 16 grand the first one. I'm making these dollar numbers up, but it costs you theoretically 20 grand to cheat me out of 16 grand for 1 block. But it's going to be exponentially harder for you to do it twice in a row, because you got to remember, you got to beat every other miner on the network. And so to do it twice, now you've spent like 100 grand. Is it in your benefit to spend 100 grand to cheat me out of 16? Maybe. So maybe I wait for 3 blocks. All right, and I can keep waiting till these confirmations happen. That just means a new block is mined on top of it, right? So my transaction gets buried deeper and deeper, which means if you're going to cheat, you have to outpace the entire network. And by the time you get 6 blocks deep, the odds that you even could beat this entirely decentralized network of other computers is close enough to 0 to just say it's 0. And that's sort of proven out throughout 14 years now. It hasn't been done. So it's possible in a block or 2, or maybe even up to 3 blocks. By the time you get 6 blocks, and there was this old adage in Bitcoin, like, if you really want to make sure you have it, 6 confirmations means you actually have it.
Yeah, but that would take an hour's time, because each block is 10 minutes, correct?
Yeah, but what are we competing against? And what's your sort of,
that's true.
That whole thing, before you even go down the rabbit hole there.
I was just kind of, yeah.
I know, but I hear it a lot. The whole rabbit hole of competing networks is, that's so slow. Mm-hmm. Well, Bitcoin wasn't invented to compete against some crappy other mimic chain. Yeah. It was to replace centralized actors, right? If I wanted to send you $16,000 across borders and I couldn't just hand you the cash, you're not talking about an hour.
Yeah.
You're talking about weeks.
Yeah, several business
And government agencies all in your shit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So what's an hour?
Yeah.
And I know he's got it. There was nobody in between. Nobody to stop halfway through the process and say, I don't think you should be allowed to spend this. That's a suspicious transaction. Right?
Yeah.
There's nobody along that way.
Yeah.
All right. So that's sort of the point. That's why you have the decentralization piece. That's where Bitcoin sort of comes in into the one of what is money. And that's where we get to when you look at the history of money, we needed a lot of these central entities, but now, if you look at now, we have these problems that you started pointing out, before. You got the massive fraud. We've seen this happen.
Yeah.
You have this thing of fiat money, which is so brand spanking new. I'll give a quick story of how we got to modern money. World War I happened, devastated the global economy. America was uniquely positioned that we had, even at that point, a strong military. We're on an island, and the only competition next to us was Canada, who didn't have a stronger army, and Mexico, which didn't have a stronger army. So we have zero competition in North America. And then you even go to South America, because we're still basically connected by land there, same thing. There is no competing force versus Europe. You had all these countries that had, had arguably competitive military might. Yeah. And so World War I devastated them. And so there's this thing called the Bretton Woods Agreement, right? And what that basically was World War I's done, and the U.S. is like, man, all the money is backed off of gold. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, where are you keeping your gold at? Right? I'm paraphrasing a little.
Oh, yeah.
But they're like, where are they keeping that gold at? Because, your infrastructure is screwed. I'm like, it is. It's like, you know what? We're the allies. We're partners. We can hold that for you. I was just like, what do you mean?
This is the United States speaking to who? Everybody?
The rest of the world.
Okay.
We could hold that for you. Look, we're in an island. Who's going to take the gold from us? Canada? We're friends. Mexico? Come on. We got you. How about this? Give us your gold, right? We'll give you dollars.
So is that where Fort Knox came from?
Right. We're talking about Fort Knox stuff, right? And they're like, we're going to give you $1. You can base your economies off the dollar. We base our economy off of gold. So it's just like being backed by gold. It's just one step away. And you don't have to worry about your infrastructure being screwed, right? And, the world went along with it. I personally believe there was a lot of click-clack involved in those negotiations. Like, we also are the only military left that can still sort of throw a punch.
Yeah.
Right? But ultimately, we didn't take it by force. We didn't take it by direct force, right? The other governments agreed. Fine. Use oil. So that was the dollar becoming the global reserve. And that only emphasized with World War II. And we haven't even got to the petrodollar piece yet, right? Now you have World War II happening. The world's even more screwed. And America wants to get in, and we had to pipe out all this money. And you have all this, I can't print money. Governments couldn't print money. And this is where the fiat piece comes in, right? They had to issue bonds or tax through tariffs or something like that, right? So it was either a tariff or a tax. That's how a government raised money and could go to war. Now, they tried to fractional reserve their way into as much as they could, like maybe 1 ounce of gold equaled $100, then like 0.9 ounces of gold equaled $100 and 0.8. But they still had to play the gold game until it got to the point in the 70s, right, where they were basically like, why even play this game anymore? And like France was like, why play this game anymore? We want our gold. So they send a warship over full of dollars, and it docked. And they're like, we've come, here's the dollars, take the gold, or we'll take our gold. And the U.S., and this is 1971 and Nixon, and he was like, yeah nah. And from this point forward, the U.S. dollar is backed by the good will and faith of the United States government, not gold. So what do you want? Because you just got the good word and faith.
Yeah.
I can take your dollars and say good word and faith, but you're not leaving with gold.
Or you can leave here with these bombs and bullets. Right?
Yeah, or you can leave with the bombs and bullets, right? And that was like where Bretton Woods, and this is also, you can go to like, I think it's the Treasury Department's website and see this. Like, this isn't like conspiracy theory. Go to like the Treasury Department. They'll tell you. Bretton Woods came along. This is where the World Bank was formatted. So how do we fix the global economy? So the Global Bank, the Bank of International Settlements, the World Bank, all these organizations were geared towards helping the world realign their economic situation. But this is why I was favored in America's favor, because we were the only sort of nation standing. That was Bretton Woods 2, which is basically like, yeah. We basically did a rug pull. If you're in crypto and you're in NFT, you're familiar with rug pulls. We rug pulled all the countries. And then simultaneously, you set up this OPEC deal that says, hey, that unit of account we were talking about earlier, you should only price oil in U.S. dollars. Yeah. And you should only accept U.S. dollars for it. And we're going to, what we did for, Saudi Arabia and all of them, we're still doing it. In exchange for that. And so now, not only did we have the gold, but if you wanted oil, you got to use the dollar, right? And this builds this value. And then you couple that with taxation. How do you get U.S. citizens to use that? Well, you tell them you got to pay taxes in it. Yeah. We only accept government bills in U.S. dollars.
That was where our strength was for the longest, was in the petrodollar, which is
the petrodollar like sealed the deal. It was like the mwah.
Yeah, but now it's collapsing, which is why I think people need to seriously look at crypto more, because the petrodollar is collapsing. And
once it's gone, we lose our pull.
Yeah,
you just explained it. It is collapsing. You watch what happened with like the war with Ukraine and Russia. And I don't know when people are listening to this show, but they'll know in the early 2020s, Russia invaded Ukraine. They went to war, and the U.S. pretty much unilaterally cut Russia off of the financial real system. Because remember, what's the only asset that backs all of their money? At the end of the day, it's the U.S. dollar. Yeah. And they cut Russia off from that in order for that. And other countries agreed.
Well, Saudi Arabia started taking rubles for their oil.
Yeah, they're right. But even if you go off of that, if you're Great Britain, or Germany, or Italy, or any other country on the planet, and your money, if you're not already dollarized, like El Salvador, Ecuador, that use the dollar, right? Yeah. That is their currency. If you're not already dollarized, but your money is backed by essentially the dollar, and we've talked about money is weaponized now. The U.S. weaponized money. This was the first time they used it against a G20 country. So if you're especially a Germany, an Italy, a UK, you're not looking like, how can I put more of this in my reserves so I'm at the whim of this government?
Right.
They're all looking for an exit plan. Yep. And once the petrodollar dies, absolutely. What is the purpose of having a U.S. dollar? It disintegrates. And this is where the Bitcoin sort of argument comes into play. Yeah. China is next in line. I think it's every 150 to 200 years, the world reserve currency shifts, right? So now it's the dollar. Before this was the British pound. Before them, it was like the Dutch, whatever. You're right. There's always a different country. Every 150.
You got the BRICS now, right? What is it? Russia. I forget. What is the BRICS nations?
Oh, the BRICS nations. Yeah. They're trying to build their own rail system. Yeah. But here's the thing. Here's the problem. They want to be next up in line. But the issue is we've proven gold failed because the U.S. ruined gold, right? And there's been several countries since which have had gold reserves other places, and like Venezuela had gold in Germany when Venezuela's economy collapsed, and they pissed off the U.S. government at that point, and the U.S. didn't want them to deal, and Venezuela's like, screw you. We got oil, we got gold. Hey, Germany, send our gold over. We're going to show them. And Germany was like, nah. Venezuela's like, but it's our gold. And they're like, yeah, it is your gold. So send it to us. Yeah.
So what exactly do you see happening in the event of the total collapse of the petrodollar?
Yeah.
What does that look like, and how can people protect themselves with crypto? Or
Yeah, like what's the future of money?
The future of money, I think, has three different avenues, right? You're going to either, the U.S. will find a way to keep using the petrodollar and keep coercing it, so we'll stay on the current path, but that's inevitably got to fail.
Yeah.
But it'll just shift maybe to another country if economists in China had their way. That would ultimately be like the BRIC system based off of the yuan, the Chinese yuan system, right? But no other country's going to fall for that. They just lived through a fiat democracy through the U.S. They're not going to just go and be like, yeah, China seems like a good idea, right? So you could keep the fiat system we have now. I don't see that really happening.
No.
A lot of countries are really high strung on the CBDC thing, which is central bank digital currencies. I know all our money is digital right now, but it's not really. The rails are still old school, like paper, right? So if a thing people don't know about the banking system right now is the banks we deal with are called commercial banks, right? They're retail. We talk with them. We transact with them. Where do the banks get their money? From the Federal Reserve, right? And so what a CBDC allows a government to do, it allows the Federal Reserve and Treasury, which already sort of act as one, right? It allows them to basically fold the Federal Reserve back into the Treasury Department, let it be government issued, and then let the Federal Reserve directly issue money to the people. No more need for the intermediaries, no more need for the Chase banks and the Bank of Americas and all of that, because they can just deal with you direct. This came up big during the COVID when they were trying to do the payouts. I'm like, man, why can't we just send people money? It was a big shit show because the Federal Reserve, the Treasury was like, we allow you to print. The Federal Reserve then printed, then gave it to the banks to figure out how to get to people, and that's where all the fuckery happened. If the Federal Reserve had it, they could just send it directly to your account. You'd wake up one morning and your Federal Reserve account is the money, right? So that gives them a lot of power. The problem is now it's digital. And this is why governments are drooling over it, not because of the ease of use. That's how they're going to try to blindfold
that's how
you.
They're going to try to control the masses.
They're like, we can not just control them, but you can spy on every cent. They'll make physical cash illegal because it's so inconvenient. Yeah. Just use this CBDC.
And dirty, and probably dirty.
Yeah, and they're going to track everything, and we've lost the battle at that point. That's a very serious danger that could happen, and anybody who can fight against it should be fighting against it. In the U.S., you're in a government still that will allow some fight. You should fight against it.
Y'all should revisit that.
Oh, we will
next time, because that's far more important than the time we just allotted to it.
Well, in my viewpoint, I totally agree, but you don't really get the weight of it until you sort of get the history of how we even got here. And the only other alternative that I see, there's really two other alternatives. Well, the main alternative.
Well, before you get there, I also wanted to add in about CBDCs that not only is it that it can be tracked and traced, but also it can be programmed. So essentially, it won't be money; it will be coupons. It will be the government telling you, you have X, Y, and Z coupon, or they'll call it $1, and you can use it. You can use it for this, this, and this, but not that. That.
Right.
And on top of that,
you've hit your toilet paper allotment for the week.
Yeah.
Right. And on top of that, they can make it expire. So if you don't use it, you lose it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And that to me, I feel like...
Oh, you'll have nothing, and you'll own nothing, and you'll love it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the only other option there, and this is where Bitcoin sort of comes into the play, of you have this peer-to-peer money that we can use. And this is one of the things you can do now, right? It's like accumulate Bitcoin. This is where the HODL mindset should be. Not about how do I flip and make more money. How do I protect my money now? And I know people are like, well, it's so volatile, you're not protecting anything. Well, over the past 10 years, since Bitcoin's inception, since it's had a price tag to it, Bitcoin's been the best performing asset in any class. Now, you can cherry pick little time frames like, well, what about this little window right here? Something outperformed it. But if you just go from the beginning and take everything from the same start point, right, and to today, Bitcoin's been the best performing asset class. That means if you had, remember, proof of work, what really that means. If I put my proof of work into a dollars worth of purchasing power, and I stored that, instead of storing it into a fiat dollar, I stored it into a Bitcoin dollar, right? Well, not only have I preserved my purchasing power, if 10 years ago I could buy a loaf of bread with that dollar, today I could still buy a loaf of bread with that dollar. With fiat dollars, if you could buy 10 years ago a loaf of bread, today you could maybe buy a slice of bread with that fiat dollar. It's losing the store of value. Instead of buying a loaf of bread with that Bitcoin I bought 10 years ago, I could now buy a whole wheat field plus a bread manufacturing company.
Yeah.
So not only did I preserve my purchasing power, which is the number one goal, preserve your purchasing power, proof of works, keep it stored, but it's also for a short span as it reaches that next wave, which would be the transactional piece. Well, as it waves that will be a great time to build generational wealth, which is why people want to hold it and not use it, because it's the best generational wealth building tool, not investment advice, but my personal strategy, right, is it's that tool to do that with. And when you see inflation like we see now, even though it's sort of coming down a little bit in late 2020, 2022, right, we're still at 7-point-something% inflation. That means 7% of your purchasing power has disappeared since last year, right? It's just gone. And so you bought some stocks, and stocks have gone up 2%. Well, that just means you've just lost 5% of your purchasing power.
The 401k hustle.
And the 401k hustle. Straight up, the dude who invented 401k was like, we should have never done this. Right? There's all these hustles, and that's sort of where the future is. And the only other future I see is sort of a mixed bag. I think this is the more realistic bag, which is these governments are going to look, and they're still going to use gold, right? Because old lessons die hard. They're still going to use whatever the popular fiat currency will in there, but that allocation basket is going to be much smaller. And I think they are going to look towards things like Bitcoin, and there'll probably be a couple other digital assets that they might look towards, and they're going to build this basket. And for Bitcoin to be successful by itself, it doesn't need to be 100% the world reserve currency. If it's 2%, and I will note, as of today, the Bank of International Settlements, and if you don't know what that is the bank. So everybody is familiar with like the World Bank. Well, the World Bank gets its money and permission to work from the Bank of International Settlements. They're the real puppet masters, right? They put the World Bank on front, and then all your central banks and Federal Reserves from there. Bank of International Settlements is the end game in this current system. And they just released in their upcoming allowances, they just released, I said in January 2025, they give permission for every other financial institution to store Bitcoin and permissionless, open, blockchain-based currencies. And Bitcoin's really it there without getting into debate. Nobody's really debates that piece. It can make up to 2% of their reserve.
Okay.
Officially. That's how Bitcoin needs to win.
Yeah. Needs to be what they select for that.
Well, it is what they're going to select. That is it. And this is how you win. And so this is how the nations win. And as an individual paying attention to things like this, and I'm not saying you have to take every single bit of your stored wealth and put it into Bitcoin or any crypto, but
it wouldn't be a bad idea.
It wouldn't be a bad idea to have a little.
Yeah.
Even just a little. You know what I mean? Is enough to at least, because the point isn't to get rich. Yeah. This isn't a get rich quick scheme. This is a get free quick scheme. And if you want to get free and want financial freedom, you can't do it using slave resources like fiat and CBDCs and all of that. You have to have freedom tools if you want to be free.
But 2% of the world.
Imagine if 2% of the world balance.
You will get rich.
I mean, right there, you're looking at. I haven't done the math behind this, but this is where you hear the arguments for a $1 to $5 million Bitcoin price.
Right.
This is all you need to get Bitcoin to $1 million plus. That's it. 2% of every world reserve is Bitcoin. Just 2%, and you got $1 million plus Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So yes, you can get financial freedom. You can preserve your purchasing power and that proof of work. It is sort of the way. Or we can go the CBDC route, which I think is really the only other realistic option.
None. No.
Yeah, we're running short. These are the conversations we can go on for like hours and hours and hours, and I think we will. We can definitely do. Let's do
yes
part
no?
twos.
Can I get a yes or no?
Sure.
Even with Bitcoin being expensive right now per coin, is it still worth it to buy?
Yes, because it's not expensive.
Yes, but not financial advice.
Yeah. Well, it's not expensive. Yes, no, but it's not expensive.
Well,
Because there's no such thing as a Bitcoin. You can buy if priced in U.S. dollars, you can buy $2 worth of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
You don't need to buy a Bitcoin.
Yeah. That's what I mean.
And that's the main
still
thing to
worth
point.
buying? Okay.
Yeah. In my opinion, I'm still buying. I dollar cost average
Especially now.
every week. I
Especially
buy a
now,
little bit more Bitcoin.
Knowing this about in 2025, in 2 years, it's like hopefully will be 2% of
2% of
the world's
Okay.
currency.
Yep.
Oh, great.
So we will definitely do a part 2. I'll definitely have you back because I know you, and you're not just going to be like, leave this podcast studio and be like, all right, that's gone out of my brain.
Yeah.
You may be like me and obsess over it now for the next couple of days, weeks, or months and stuff. So we'll definitely have a part 2 and see what you find with that. We've talked about a lot of stuff. There's a lot of resources. The Bitcoin mantra is don't trust, verify.
Yes.
I'm a strong believer in it. I talk very confidently, so people tend to believe me, and I encourage them, don't. Do your own research. We have an episode on that and how to do it, so believe me on that. But you can go to theblocument.com. I will link you to resources on this everywhere, and these resources will span, again, you can go to official government websites like with the Brentwoods. Don't take my word on these kind of things. We'll give you other resources on the history of money, some good reading sources and whatnot. So go to theblocument.com to get that information, look at other shows. You can find us on Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook, all at The Blockument. If you have questions about today's show, drop it in like the YouTube comments. If you're watching on YouTube, drop it on our Twitter.
Yeah, tweet us.
Tweet us. We'll answer it either right then and there. Maybe we'll make a whole episode, or maybe we'll ask you to come on the episode and ask us. For my people who like to pay in Satoshis, if you've noticed, we don't have a lot of advertisements because I don't want the messaging to get confused on that. But you can check us out on Fountain. And if you feel like we're giving you valuable content, it allows you to pay with Satoshis. You can decide on a Satoshi amount. Maybe you want to give us, 2 Satoshis per minute of streaming content, and they'll work that all out. I think next year we're going to explore on how we can do some listener value for value share. So if we earn money, how we can give back to the community for helping us grow and whatnot. So check us out, The Blockument. I don't know if people like your insight, Gunn. Is there any way they can get in contact with you? Or do you want them to get in contact with you?
Anybody can find me on Facebook, Damon Gunn. Damon spelled with 2 D's for a double dose of this pimping. You can come get some.
That's right.
So, yeah.
Oh, Lord.
My main man.
Yeah, really.
All right. So until next time, like we've said, come for the riches.
Stay for the revolution.
Check y'all next time.
Peace.
Oh my gosh.